And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. And life is indeed a highway. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and author of Someone Died, Now What? Matt, I understand that you are in line this week to get your third booster.
Yes, finally, Stephanie and I are lined up for this Thursday. We'll get our booster shot. Looking forward to that, trying to do our part. And as you know, I deal a lot with seniors, so it's a very important day for us. And you had something to say about the booster.
Well, yes. Interestingly, that I was able to get my third booster in December based on where I fall into the categories, etc. And recently, and I feel very lucky that I haven't had any reactions. A friend of mine told me they had a reaction. And by the way, folks, this isn't to scare anybody. It's actually FYI that I didn't even realize that I actually had reactions. I had very uncomfortable under my arms around sort of that area. I find that I learned that it's actually a real thing, that the lymph nodes get swollen and you can get itchy and whatever. It does not last. But I thought it was really interesting that I didn't realize that was actually a reaction. It was only when someone told me that was what they were having. I was like, wait a sec. That happened to me. I just didn't know what it was.
And look at that. So, you lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, we don't know. And that's a lot about why we talk about life unrehearsed. And in our segment today on helping moms and dads, we do our best to provide some interesting topics and guests that will share in the various things that we struggle with, especially the sandwich generation. So today, again, is no exception. Matt, what are we talking about this week?
Yeah, this week, as we age, our driving skills tend to decline. But how do you know it's reached a point to call it quits? And let's face it, it's extremely rare to find someone that is willing to give up their license. And this inevitably leads to some tough and sometimes heated family conversations. So to help guide us, we're very pleased to have Susan Sofer on the line. Susan's an occupational therapist, certified in driver rehabilitation, and the owner of ACT, Autonomy Community Therapy. Susan, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thanks so much, Matt and Corey. Appreciate that.
Well, so glad to have you on the show for such a difficult issue. But first, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what you do?
As an occupational therapist, and when we're talking about driving, I consult with the clients, their families. I assess the client and sometimes retrain with respect to their driving abilities. And I'm usually asked to determine whether the person is safe to continue driving.
So in so doing, I wondered, how would we know what the right time to have someone evaluated is?
That's a good question. The advice I give is you may want to ask yourself a few questions. You may want to say, in terms of the driver that's in question, look for certain errors that are an indication that there are changes going on, such as, is the individual wandering between the lanes when they're driving? Are they taking the correct lane position before or after turns, in particular left turns? Or do they hesitate to proceed when they're at an intersection? Are they checking their mirrors and their blind spots? Also, are they missing traffic signs? Are they getting lost when they're going on a route that is very typical for them? Have they on occasion confused the brake or gas pedal? Are other drivers honking them more often than not? Mm-hmm. And have they had any close calls? Are you noticing more dings in the car? Is the car going in for repairs more often? Those are some items that you can look for that give you an idea that the skills used for driving may be changing.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt and Corey, and that's Susan Sofer, occupational therapist and driver rehabilitation specialist. Now, Susan, you're in there. You're doing these evaluations. For those who may not know what an evaluation consists of, what happens during the evaluation?
Okay. So I try to make the person as comfortable as possible because it's only natural that they're quite nervous when they come to the office.
Sure.
Because they know that they're there for a driving evaluation. And nobody wants to give up their driver's permit because it's so attached to their being and their independence. So I do an interview, and that's to get to know them better, gather the necessary information. I check physically how they're doing because there's a significant physical component to driving, which is obvious to everybody, and then spend time looking at other skills that are used for driving, like attention, concentration, speed of making decisions, that type of thing.
Oh my gosh, this cannot be easy for you to do in any stretch of the imagination for the reasons you pointed out. And as a matter of fact, as you went through the list, I'm like, oh my God, I think I need my license taken away. But in all seriousness, as people age, is it true or false? Does that lead to reduced driving abilities?
As they age? Well, it's sort of a loaded question, in that I don't believe that it's not as we age that a person becomes unsafe, okay, where people tend to look at that as being an older driver problem or issue, but it's more about medical conditions in driving. So that we know that medical conditions can affect people at any age, but they're more likely to occur as we age. And that even if there's no single condition that's quite severe, several conditions, when combined, and the medications that the persons take, can render their driving unsafe.
So
that makes
Susan,
perfect sense.
It does. And taking this a little further, and specifically regarding skills required for driving, we sometimes take it for granted. But as we age, are there specific skills that you're seeing firsthand that are at risk here and need to be addressed?
Well, certainly from a more physical element, we see that there are changes in one's coordination, physical reaction time, and meaning just being able to move your right leg between the two pedals, or perhaps turning the steering wheel, maybe related to some stiffness, some arthritis in the joints, or any limitation in strength or movement for other reasons. There's also the vision. Obviously, our vision has to be up to par, and it's normal that there are changes in our vision as we get older, and that's why we have to keep up with our visual assessments with our eye doctors and optometrists. But there's more also the speed of processing what we see and the time that it takes us to process what we're seeing and make decisions about what we've seen so that we take an action with the car. And that changes over time.
That's the voice of Susan Soifer. She is a driving rehabilitation specialist, and she's talking about, or we're talking about, how do we know when it might be time to let go of your license? I have a bizarre question for you. Has the pandemic affected driving skills?
I believe so. It's that because what's happened with the pandemic for all of us at all ages is, people who are still in the workforce have been working from home. They haven't had to drive, right? Great. You're not spending money on gas, no wear and tear on the car. Older people are staying home so that they don't get sick. They're not driving out. They're ordering their groceries online. Their families bringing them their food. Like anything else, if you don't use your skills, they're going to, they may dull. You might get slow. You're not as sharp. And the same thing is with driving. The less we drive, the less we're using our skills to that level that's needed for safe driving. And the old adage of, if you don't use it, you lose it, it does come into play in driving as well. So because people, as they're getting older, and our older population, there's nowhere for them to go. Everything's closed and they can't go see their families, they're not driving. If you're driving once a week, 4 times a month, that's not enough to maintain your skills.
It's so true. I even found myself, I think it was 6 days, 5 or 6 days without actually driving, and I couldn't believe it. And then you find yourself, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, and geez, you really do have to have that habit. Susan, we have to head out to traffic very soon, but when we come back, like we've talked about, no one wants to give up their driving permit or driver license. But sometimes the adult children see things with their folks. We want to know, how do we start that tough conversation with our parents that it might be time to let go of that driving permit?
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota, along with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio. And we're talking about seniors and driving with Susan Seufer. Susan is an occupational therapist. She's a certified driver rehabilitation specialist and the owner of ACT, Autonomy Community Therapy. And you just heard the song Cars playing because that's what we're talking about. Susan, we spoke a little bit before the traffic break about how challenging it is to actually give up one's license. I can't even imagine having that discussion with my parents who are elderly now, and we're not there yet, but we will be at some point, I suspect. Mm-hmm. What do you suggest? How do you even start that conversation?
Usually I suggest, starting it, everybody's in a calm, comfortable environment. And to, when you're discussing the person's health and safety, that's what you want to make sure for them, and that you want them to continue driving and maintain their independence so long as it's safe to do so. And if there's examples you can bring up about being, concerned that you've noticed some changes, which is only normal, that as you're getting older, we do things a little differently or not as quickly as we used to. As I mentioned earlier, maybe saying, you happen to notice that the cars had to go into the shop more frequently than normal. Those are some items that can be discussed. And you can say that, look, I want you to continue driving, but I'm concerned. When I call the house and you're not home, and when your cell phone's not on and I can't reach you, I worry. But if I know that it's safe for you to be driving, I wouldn't worry, certainly not as much. And that perhaps what we need is to, see somebody that this is what they do, and they can tell us, is it safe for you to keep driving? And this is very similar to going to the doctor. If you're not feeling well or you're questioning the symptoms that you see yourself and you wonder if you're sick, what do? You call the doctor, you make an appointment, you go in, he sees you, he talks to you. He doesn't give you a prescription for medication right away. Odds are he's going to send you for a blood test of some kind, and he wants to see what's wrong before he treats you. And similarly is what I do with driving. It's meeting the person because you want to see them, hear what they have to say, observe what their skills are like, and then determine if it's still safe for them to be driving or if there's some intervention that may be needed.
That's Susan Seufer, a driver rehabilitation specialist, and we're talking about the sensitive topic of perhaps stopping the driver permit. Okay, Susan, you know what? I heard Susan Seufer in Life Unrehearsed, and I followed everything she said step by step. It's working out okay, I thought, but no. I know my mom or dad is a danger to themselves, and they are just stubborn. They are absolutely refusing to give up their license. What can we do in those situations? Because we know this is a real-life situation that I'm sure you see all the time.
So you want to do your best to get them to, perhaps have the assessment, discuss it at the next medical appointment that they have with their family physician. And if you're concerned about, whether the discussion will come up or bringing it up while you're with your parent and the doctor, you can certainly make a call ahead of time, send an email, let the doctor know what your concerns are, and that he or she can bring it up during their appointment. Because the doctors do have a responsibility to inform the licensing bureau if there's an issue. If it's very evident that your parent shouldn't be driving because you've noticed the accidents, or another family member's been in the car and seen how they're not aware of where they are with respect to the other drivers, you can always, the drastic actions are removing the battery from the car. Wow. If the person is able to repair that on their own, you may want to suggest, Mom, Johnny, your son, your grandchild needs to get to school, and we don't have enough cars in the family, and you're not going out so much now. What do you think if we let him use the car for the next few months? And it's a way of gradually, slowing down the driving of the individual as they adjust to not having the car available to them. And in the most drastic situations, what I tell people is you can call the police if your parent has a very regular regime when they go out, where they go. If they see the person driving on the road and they see them driving erratically, they will stop them and they will report to the Licensing Bureau, and that will start the medical process for the assessment.
I think it's incredible what you're sharing with us in terms of, I know clearly it can be very heart-wrenching, but it's so important. We're talking about everybody's safety here. Can I ask you, is it mandatory in Quebec at some point to either be assessed or give up your license or any of those things? What is the law?
What the law is in Quebec is that if the medical division of the Licensing Bureau, if they haven't heard anything about you since you've been driving since you're 16, they'll leave you alone until you're 75. And at 75, they send you 2 forms, one that has to be filled out by your physician, the other by your ophthalmologist or optometrist. So that's their first line of checking, how is our driver doing? And then they'll take action from there depending on what the content is of the form. If everything seems fine to them and there's no indication that the person has a condition that's going to change drastically that needs to be monitored, they may not ask for these forms again until you're 80, and then usually every 2 years after that.
Right,
there's no obligatory road test, like automatic. Okay. It's only based on something that's happened.
Right. We're talking with Susan Sofer about seniors and driving. And Susan, we have to wrap up pretty soon here. But it's one thing to say, look, mom or dad, we've got to take their license away. It's just not working out. However, there's the other role reversal. This will also change the role of adult children as well when a license is taken away, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so it does. And I do tell people that, when the older adult is reluctant to give up their permit because they also don't want to be a burden on their children if they can't get around and take care of themselves, I often initiate that discussion when I see them in the office, and I say, that's what family's all about. This is the family circle, and how, we have a close relationship. You brought me up to be independent, to do for others, to be kind, that I am who I am today because of you. And now it's my turn to give back. And you need some help, and I'm here to help you because I love you.
So beautiful. Thank you, Susan, so much for the plethora of knowledge that you just bestowed upon us. How can people get a hold of you?
The best way, you can leave me a message at my office always, which is the number is 514-733-1414, and you can send me emails to info@actdriving.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Susan. That's Susan Sofer, Certified Driver Rehabilitation Specialist at ACT, ACT, Autonomy Community Therapy. All right, Corey, what do we have coming up next week on Life Unrehearsed?
Next week, her grandfather loves lasagna, so she's baking them en masse to help him and others with Alzheimer's. And what is the financial and emotional toll on caregivers, and what can be done about it? Well, thankfully, we have specialist Dr. Amy Dupree, who's going to be in the house to discuss this very important issue.
Yeah, caregivers do have a big role, and sometimes they may not even realize the extent of the toll it takes, both financially and emotional. And Dr. Amy Dupree is just excellent when it comes to this. We're looking forward to having her on the show next week. So thank you for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed. As a reminder, for all your inquiries or assistance with navigating home care, seniors' residences, or downsizing, be my pleasure to help. Our services are completely free. Call me at Lianas Senior Transition Support at 514-622-8074, or look us up online at Lianas Senior Transition Support. Many thanks to our technical producer, Benjamin. Great job. And you can listen to Life Unrehearsed here on CJD 800 every Saturday at 3 p.m.